I am Vanessa Cole. When my grandmother passed, it felt like losing my center of gravity. Everything I knew, everything I loved, had revolved around her. Most people associate grandmothers with baking cookies or knitting sweaters, but mine taught me strength and the quiet courage it takes to live gracefully even when life isn't kind. Her hands were soft, yet strong, worn from years of raising children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Towards the end, her fingers shook when she reached for her tea, and her body leaned more heavily on mine each day. I cherished those moments, though. Every hospital trip, every night spent dozing beside her bed, I counted them as small, precious victories. Time stolen from the inevitable. Tessa, my younger sister, didn't seem to notice the slipping hours. She breezed in and out of our grandmother's life, a cheerful ghost who left faint impressions and little else. Her visits became fewer, her excuses more predictable. Work, she'd sigh, or life's just too busy. I never said anything because Grandma never complained. She just smiled, her watery eyes filled with an understanding I couldn't grasp. Maybe she always knew who would stay when things got tough. When the lawyer called us together to read the will, I was numb with grief, almost missing the significance of the moment. But as he read the words aloud, I felt every set of eyes turn slowly toward me. Grandma had left me nearly everything. Not just the small house and the modest savings she'd guarded fiercely, but every tangible memory and every piece of our shared history. I felt the room shift. Tessa's eyes darkened, something unreadable flickering in their depths before settling into a forced calm. She smiled stiffly, murmuring congratulations through teeth clenched just enough to notice. I knew instantly things had changed. Not just because of the money, but because Grandma's choice had revealed cracks in our family that I'd spent years pretending didn't exist. As I walked away from that meeting, clutching Grandma's decision like a lifeline, I wondered if anything would ever be the same again. Deep down, I already knew the answer. It didn't take long for Tessa to reach out. Her call came late in the evening, the screen glowing softly in the quiet of my bedroom. My heart thudded uneasily as I picked up, anticipating something between a reconciliation and confrontation. "Hey," she said, her voice unnaturally cheerful. "How are you holding up?" It sounded rehearsed, hollow. I swallowed hard, pushing aside the weariness in my bones. "I'm managing," I replied carefully, guarding my voice from betraying too much. A brief silence stretched between us, heavy with words neither of us could say outright. Finally, she broke it. "Listen, Vanessa," she started, pausing to take a breath. "About the inheritance. I was thinking maybe Grandma meant for us to share. She loved both of us after all." Her words felt slippery, coated in false kindness. I imagined her rehearsing this speech in front of the mirror, perfecting her tone until it sounded just right, almost believable. "Tessa," I said, gentle but firm, determined to hold my ground. Grandma made her wishes clear. She had her reasons. She laughed softly, the sound carrying a subtle bitterness that sent chills down my spine. "Sure," she said, suddenly casual, masking hurt with ease. "I just thought you'd want to keep things fair. But hey, I get it." As the call ended, silence filled the space around me, heavier now, wrapped in unanswered questions and a gnawing discomfort. I tried to shake the feeling, to dismiss the growing shadow that Tessa had cast with her suggestion, but it lingered, insistent. Then came the messages, short, cutting texts from cousins, vague and passive-aggressive notes from aunts and uncles. My phone buzzed constantly with their veiled accusations and cold congratulations. "You must be relieved," one message read, "to finally get something for all your hard work." The sarcasm dripped off each word, staining my thoughts. I felt cornered, isolated by the quiet insinuations. I closed my eyes tightly, wishing away the conflict, but deep down, I knew it was only the beginning. The aftermath was swift and brutal. It started subtly, with an icy edge to family conversations and a chill in the air whenever I entered a room. But soon, those quiet slights turned into something sharper, something harder to ignore. Texts from cousins trickled in, passive-aggressive notes masked as friendly inquiries. "Must feel good to finally cash in," one message read, bitterness seeping through each word. Another cousin asked innocently, "Did Grandma really choose just you, or was there some persuasion involved?" I felt my stomach twist each time my phone buzzed, anxiety gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. Worst were the phone calls from my aunt and uncle. Their voices held a careful, calculated coolness, polite but laced with skepticism. "You know how Grandma could get confused," my uncle murmured one night, his tone suggesting more than he dared openly accuse. I tried to hold on to the truth, but their words stuck like tiny needles, pricking deeper with each conversation. Doubts crept in, whispers of guilt and uncertainty that unsettled my sleep. What if Grandma had made a mistake? What if my family never forgave me for something beyond my control? Then came Tessa's invitation, delivered in a group chat meant to look casual but felt carefully orchestrated. "Just a quick family meeting to clear the air," she wrote. "Let's not make it dramatic." My heart pounded heavily as I stared at the screen. I knew the game she was playing. Quiet manipulation disguised as familial concern. Every instinct screamed at me to decline, to protect myself from another emotional ambush. Yet part of me felt compelled to confront this head-on. Ignoring it wouldn't make the tension vanish. So despite the unease simmering inside, I agreed. Typing out my acceptance felt like stepping onto thin ice, knowing it would inevitably crack beneath my feet. But I needed answers, clarity, closure. More than anything, I needed to face the truth of how fragile our family ties had always been. The date was set, the stage prepared, and quietly, I braced myself for whatever storm awaited. On the day of the meeting, anxiety settled deep in my chest, a heavy stone pressing down with every breath. Driving to Tessa's house, the world seemed oddly silent, as if even the universe was holding its breath, waiting to witness whatever would unfold. I parked my car, hesitating for a long moment, hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. The house looked deceptively welcoming, with familiar lights glowing softly behind drawn curtains. A facade, I reminded myself. A cozy illusion meant to hide the tension simmering just beneath the surface. Gathering my courage, I stepped onto the porch, each step feeling heavier than the last. I knocked softly, the sound seeming louder in the stillness. The door swung open almost immediately, Tessa standing there smiling warmly, a perfect mask, polished and impenetrable. "Glad you made it," she said, voice gentle, eyes unreadable. "Come in, everyone's waiting." Stepping inside felt like crossing into enemy territory. The room fell silent as I entered, a collective inhale shifting the air. My gaze swept the room, meeting wary eyes. Some angry, others uncomfortable, all waiting expectantly. Tessa gestured to an empty chair in the circle they'd arranged, the setup oddly reminiscent of an intervention. My heart pounded, a mix of dread and indignation stirring in my veins. I sat carefully, keeping my composure despite the tightness in my throat. "Vanessa," Tessa began, standing at the center, voice confident yet tinged with feigned compassion. "We just want to clear things up, to understand what really happened with Grandma." The carefully chosen words echoed around me, dripping with subtle accusation. Each family member shifted slightly, eyes locked on mine, silently judging. I clenched, my fists discreetly, trying to steady the trembling that threatened to reveal my vulnerability. This wasn't a family meeting. It was a trial. Tessa had orchestrated this moment meticulously, casting me in a role I didn't recognize or deserve. But as I sat there, surrounded yet utterly alone, I knew I wouldn't let them rewrite my story. Taking a slow breath, I prepared myself. They had questions, yes, but I had truth on my side. The air grew thick with expectation. Tessa stood in the center, poised, her expression carefully controlled. She glanced around, ensuring everyone's attention before beginning her speech. "Vanessa," she said smoothly, her voice carrying the practiced calmness of someone about to deliver painful truths wrapped in velvet. "We've always been a family. Families support one another. But lately, things have felt uneven." She paused dramatically, letting the implication settle. I forced myself not to respond, holding her gaze defiantly. She continued, her voice dropping into a softer, falsely sympathetic tone. "We know you cared for Grandma. No one denies that. But there's a difference between genuine caregiving and influencing someone who was vulnerable." She paused again, allowing murmurs of agreement and subtle nods from the others to bolster her point. My stomach churned, nausea mixing with outrage. Tessa's accusations weren't entirely unexpected, but hearing them voiced so publicly, so confidently, was a betrayal I hadn't fully braced for. She pressed on, emboldened by the apparent support from our relatives. "You've always known how to get what you wanted, Vanessa. And maybe this time you took advantage without even realizing it." My breath quickened, heat flooding my cheeks. The room closed in, each word tightening around me like a vice. Glances darted my way, eyes filled with suspicion, judgment, disappointment, emotions too vivid to ignore. I felt my voice trembling, ready to burst from my chest, yet I held it back, determined not to surrender my dignity. This ambush was deliberate. Tessa's words calculated to dismantle my credibility piece by piece. Her performance was flawless, crafted to isolate me. She stood confidently in the center, radiating authority, turning my acts of care into twisted manipulations. Yet beneath my anger and humiliation, something else began to stir. A quiet resolve. She might have cornered me with accusations and whispers, but she had underestimated one crucial thing: the power of truth. And as Tessa finished, her eyes triumphantly meeting mine, I steadied my breathing, waiting for my moment to reclaim my voice and my story. I stood slowly, feeling every eye in the room lock onto me, waiting for me to falter or explode. But my heart, though heavy with pain, beat steadily. In my chest, I met Tessa's gaze, holding it until I saw a flicker of uncertainty pass across her carefully composed face. "Tessa," I said softly, evenly, "you've painted quite a picture, a story that's believable, even compelling." My voice trembled slightly, but I kept going, drawing strength from the quiet dignity I had learned from Grandma herself. "But stories aren't always truths. And your version," I said, glancing briefly around the circle, "conveniently ignores everything else. The hours spent at her bedside, the hospital nights when none of you were there." I paused, giving weight to each word. The room was silent, tension crackling subtly, invisible threads connecting everyone present in a fragile, strained web. "You say I manipulated her?" I continued, my voice strengthening, becoming clearer, more confident. "But you're forgetting who Grandma truly was. She wasn't fragile or easily swayed. She saw everything clearly, knew everyone exactly as they were, including me." Tessa's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of unease breaking through her. Mask. The room held its breath, anticipating more revelation. "The truth is," I said quietly, firmly, "Grandma chose to trust the one who showed up, who stayed. The inheritance wasn't payment, it was gratitude. And none of you were there enough to see why." As I finished, my heartbeat steadied, grounding me in the certainty of my words. The room remained silent, the truth settling around us like dust after a storm. Tessa stood stiffly, her eyes glancing nervously around the room, sensing the shift in dynamics. I exhaled slowly, feeling lighter yet profoundly saddened by the confrontation's necessity. But clarity had been achieved, and the power Tessa sought had slipped from her fingers. Now, finally, It was my turn to reveal the deeper truth I'd kept hidden. The undeniable proof of Grandma's voice, captured forever in her handwritten words. The letter waited patiently in my bag, ready to speak when I chose to let it. I reached slowly into my bag, the quiet rustling of paper filling the charged silence. Every eye followed my movements, curiosity mingling with apprehension. My fingers brushed against the familiar texture of Grandma's letter, the simple yet profound evidence I'd held on to tightly since her passing. As I unfolded it, a sudden stillness enveloped the room, each breath suspended, waiting for the truth I was about to share. My throat tightened slightly, emotion rising, but I steadied myself, drawing strength from the honesty and love contained in these fragile pages. "This," I began, my voice steady but gentle, "is Grandma's own handwriting, her words, her heart, her reasons." I took a breath and began to read aloud, each word deliberate, clear, and unmistakably hers. "My dear Vanessa, if you're reading this, I'm no longer here, but my love remains. I've seen how quietly you've carried burdens others chose not to notice. You've held my hand in moments of pain and stood beside me when my own strength faltered. These actions were not unnoticed or unappreciated. I chose to leave my inheritance to you because you offered something no one else did. Your presence, your patience, your unwavering compassion. You never asked for anything, though you deserved everything." To the family reading this now, understand that Vanessa's inheritance is not an oversight nor manipulation. It's my truth, clearly seen and deliberately chosen. I ask you to respect this decision, just as Vanessa respected me every day we shared. When I finished, the silence remained, now softened, edged with recognition and quiet shame. Tessa's face turned pale, her confident posture collapsing subtly, her eyes downcast, unable to face the room she had moments before commanded. The letter felt lighter now, having released its truth into the world. I carefully folded it again, holding it close, feeling Grandma's presence in each careful fold. The truth had been spoken, undeniable and freeing. Yet, as I stood quietly, I felt no triumph, only the profound relief and quiet sadness of having needed to defend something that had always been obvious to me. Grandma's love was given freely, never taken. The silence lingered, stretching into something softer yet no less profound. Slowly, the tension dissolved, replaced by an uncomfortable, quiet acknowledgement of truth. I glanced around the circle, noting the subtle shifts in posture and expression, seeing clearly how Grandma's words had landed on each of them. "Uncle." Richard stood first, silently rising from his seat. He looked older suddenly, burdened by shame he hadn't anticipated. Without speaking, he quietly exited the room, his departure a stark acknowledgement of his earlier doubts and assumptions. My aunt, who had remained rigidly composed throughout, finally looked up at me, eyes filled with regret. "Vanessa," she said softly, voice hesitant but sincere. "I'm sorry we doubted you, and Grandma." Her words brought a tightness to my chest, not from anger, but relief, validation after weeks of silent accusations and doubts that had weighed on me like heavy stones. I nodded slightly, unable to speak, but feeling her genuine remorse deeply. Tessa stood motionless, pale and shaken, her eyes wide with disbelief. Her carefully constructed narrative had crumbled before everyone's eyes, and she seemed smaller now, vulnerable beneath the weight of her revealed deception. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but nothing came out. Instead, she dropped her gaze to the floor, unable to hold anyone's eyes. Watching her, I felt no satisfaction, no victory, just a quiet sadness for the bonds that had been frayed and possibly broken forever. The room slowly emptied, family members quietly leaving, some touching my shoulder softly as they passed, their gestures a blend of apology and comfort. Soon, only Tessa and I remained, the silence between us heavy with unspoken emotion. Finally, She met my gaze briefly, her voice a faint whisper. "Vanessa, I—" She stopped, unable to finish. I saw a flicker of genuine pain, a moment of raw, unguarded regret. Without responding, I quietly gathered my things, understanding there was nothing left to say that hadn't already been revealed. As I stepped into the night, the truth walked beside me. Heavy, yet comforting. Freeing, yet bittersweet. The night. Air felt cool against my heated skin, calming the turmoil within. As I stood alone outside Tessa's house, the muffled sounds of farewells and car doors closing seemed distant, unreal. A fading echo of the emotional storm that had just passed. Glanced back briefly, watching as the last family members departed, their headlights briefly illuminating my solitary figure. The quiet, empty street stretched before me, stark and peaceful, a strange contrast to the tangled emotions still coursing through my veins. Then I heard soft footsteps behind me. Tessa stood in the doorway, hesitant and shadowed by the dim porch. Light. She made no move to approach, but her presence was palpable, carrying an uncertainty neither of us could ignore. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The space between us felt charged with unsaid apologies and unresolved resentment, each waiting for the other to break the silence. Finally, Tessa's voice came quietly, fragile, yet sincere. "I don't know how it got this far, Vanessa." I turned, slowly, meeting her gaze. Her eyes held vulnerability I hadn't seen since childhood, unguarded and weary from the weight of our fractured relationship. "Neither do I," I replied softly, honesty making my voice tremble slightly. But it did. She took a cautious step forward, stopping halfway, as if afraid crossing the full distance would shatter whatever fragile piece we'd managed to find. "I never intended. I didn't want this." "Maybe not," I acknowledged gently. "But intentions matter less than actions. And your actions hurt." Tessa nodded slowly, accepting my words without argument. Her shoulders sagged slightly, a quiet surrender, to the truth she couldn't deny. We stood there, two sisters separated by a mere few feet, yet worlds apart, each silently acknowledging the damage done, unsure if healing was even possible. Yet, despite the pain, a quiet understanding emerged between us, acknowledgement of a shared history too complex to untangle fully in one night. With a heavy sigh, I stepped away, leaving her standing quietly under the soft porch light. Words weren't enough, not yet. Time and distance, perhaps, could do what conversation tonight couldn't. Heal the wounds we'd inflicted and suffered. As I walked away from Tessa's house, each step felt both heavier and lighter, paradoxically burdened, yet unburdened. The night sky above was vast, a comforting expanse reminding me of life's quiet resilience. How even after the fiercest storms, stillness returns. Driving home, silence filled the car, a gentle companion allowing the evening's events to settle into clarity. Emotions surged and receded like gentle waves, washing over me with memories of grandma, family fractures, and the truths unveiled tonight. Pulling into my driveway, I lingered for a moment, reluctant to break the quiet peace of solitude. Slowly, I entered my house, stepping into familiar surroundings now shaded by a new, hard-won sense of self-awareness. Settling into Grandma's favorite armchair, I felt her presence strongly, an invisible comfort wrapping itself around my shoulders like the shawls she wore. For the first time since her passing, the ache of loss felt softer, replaced by a gentle warmth born from clarity and understanding. Tonight had been painful. There was no denying the deep wounds exposed, but it had also freed me, untethering years of unseen burdens. Family ties had been strained, perhaps irreparably, yet the truth had released me from doubt, from silent suffering, from carrying blame that was never mine. Outside, dawn approached slowly, the sky tinged with soft hues, signaling renewal, another chance. Gazing into the gentle shift from night to day, I understood clearly the necessity of closure, the quiet bravery it takes to face pain head-on, to speak truth despite the cost. As morning light filled the room, I rose, feeling a quiet strength, a resilience I recognized as Grandma's legacy, gifted to me long before her inheritance. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, rebuilding seldom is, but it was mine, clearly defined by authenticity, compassion, and, finally, freedom. With a deep breath, I embraced the day, heart heavier yet stronger, ready to begin again, knowing fully, now, who I was and what I stood for. This was Grandma's final gift, not just inheritance, but the courage to live openly, truthfully, and without fear.